Great. So thank you and welcome to everyone for attending Comunidad 3's 1L panel on how to succeed at your summer job with speakers from various practice areas. My name is Ramey Kino. I'm a 3L and president of FALS at Santa Clara Law, and I am also joined by Sofia de Guzman, a 2L and co-president of PALS at UC Hastings. We will be moderating today's session. To submit a question, please use the Q&A function below. There is a button, and the chat feature is available to communicate with attendees. Please do not post questions for speakers in the chat. I'll turn it over to Sophia to introduce our panelists.
All right, so first we have Rochelle, who obtained her JD at UC Hastings and interned at the East Bay Community Law Center for her 1L summer. She now works as an income security housing legal fellow at the National Women's Law Center in Washington, D.C. Thank you for being here, Rochelle. We have Adrian, who graduated from UC Berkeley School of Law and interned at the AIDS Legal Referral Panel for his 1L summer. And he now works as an associate attorney at Frella, Braun, and Martel. And last but not least, we have Jessica, who obtained her JD at Santa Clara University School of Law and clerked with the Los Angeles Dependency Lawyers in her 1L summer. Currently, she works as a deputy public defender for Los Angeles County. And for our first question, I'll turn it back to Romain.
Okay, great. So we first wanted to start with each of you telling us about your 1L summer experience. And I'll start first with Jessica, Adrian, and then Rochelle. Jessica, because your 1L summer experience is related to what you do now, we wanted to ask you the following question. How did your 1L summer experience at Los Angeles Dependency Lawyers impact your career?
Yeah, I feel like it had a huge impact on my career. When I first started law school, I did not think that I wanted to get into criminal law at all. I mainly wanted to focus on more like juvenile dependency, something involving juvenile. And I really liked dependency. So when I applied, I was like, I'm going to get an interesting perspective here. The Los Angeles Dependency Lawyers, they specifically represent parents in dependency proceedings who are accused of child abuse or neglect, and are facing the process of the state trying to take custody of their kids away. So I was like, I'm going to get a very interesting perspective here. And then, I thought that's mainly what I wanted out of the internship. But then working in that type of work and representing those types of clients really gave me, I feel like it really touched my heart and gave me a huge sense of empathy because, you can read a very bad report, right, that looks bad on its face and it makes your client look bad. But then you hear their story and you hear about the traumas that they've been through and you hear about how, they were never really taught about what healthy parenting looks like, and you feel for them so much. It really made me, it really lit a fire under me, to become the best advocate. I was advocating for the underdog all the time. And it's a lot like being a public defender. I feel like it really pointed me in the direction of preparing me to be a public defender, because I saw that a lot of the parents that we had as clients, unfortunately had, criminal cases. And because of those criminal cases, that was a lot of the reason why these dependency proceedings were happening. And I just really wanted to make a big impact for them. And I thought, representing these clients is touching my heart so much, like, I think I should look into, public defense work. And that's really what pointed me in that direction. And after, working with LA dependency lawyers, I eventually got an internship working for the federal public defender. And that just solidified everything for me and really pointed me, in the direction where I am now and led me to my dream job. So that 1L internship was huge for me, huge for my career.
Yeah, thank you for going over that. I think it's so nice to see, this linear path from what you did in 1L summer to what you do now. And, it's very interesting. So thank you. Adrian, I wanted to turn to you now. So unlike Jessica, your 1L summer experience at a nonprofit is different from your firm position today. And so can you tell us how your 1L summer experience at AIDS Legal Referral Panel prepared you for your firm position today?
Sure. So just some background on me. I am currently an employment attorney. And a huge bulk of the work that I'm doing right now is actually workplace investigations, which entails a lot of like tracking people down and talking to them and investigating what happened and asking a lot of questions. And actually, a way that I was not expecting ALRP to prepare me or help me in my current role is exactly that, like talking to people on the phone and like gathering facts and collecting information. That was a huge part of my role at ALRP. When you're doing intakes, you're like asking a lot of questions and issue spotting on the phone. And so, yeah, it was, that's, I guess, one really big way that I feel like it helped and prepared me for my current role. But also, you have your typical kind of lawyering skills that that benefit you across the board, of course, like research and writing and taking direction from your supervisors. Of course, those are those also applied. And for people who are thinking like, oh, I'm like probably going to be public interest for my 1L summer, but I'm thinking maybe going to a firm. That's like very, very common. So don't worry that like you're not going to have anything to talk about during your interview or anything like that, because there's a lot of skills that are transferable across different sectors of the legal field. So don't worry about that. Actually, yeah, I found that my experience in the nonprofit world actually carried a lot of transferable skills. The main one, I guess, that I'm identifying now is just like speaking with people and collecting information and narrowing your questions to those like issue spotting. To issue spotting. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy you said that because I think you elaborated on such a key thing about this panel. There are specific, transferable skills, and for you is connecting with clients and information gathering. And then there's also general transferable skills that 1L can really transfer from their 1L summer experience to later positions throughout law school and their career. So thank you. I wanted to finally turn to Rochelle. So similar to Jessica, your time at a nonprofit during your 1L summer is related to what you do now in some way. And so we wanted to ask, how did your 1L summer experience at the East Bay Community Law Center prepare you for a government-related career?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here and be on the panel with like these folks. But yeah, so with the East Bay Community Law Center, for my 1L summer, I just generally wanted to do a public service, public interest work. And so my experience at EBCLC just kind of like gave me an idea of what public service entails as a lawyer, because my prior experience before law school was doing nonprofit work or social justice work as an activist and as an educator. So that really like gave me an idea of like, or giving me like a hands-on training on what it's like to represent clients. But it opened my eyes into kind of like what lawyers can do as like a social justice advocate. And so like working at the housing unit at the East Bay Community Law Center, I kind of like saw just, I mean, it's hard not to see like the housing crisis as a long-term Bay Area resident, but like really seeing how policies work like on the day-to-day for like low-income families. And so I was able to really like in the back of my head, like during the entire experience, as much as like it was great to be helping out individuals in like a terrible time in their lives, I also like wanted to see what I can do as a lawyer to change like the system, right? And so it really gave me like the motivation to address that in a larger scale as a lawyer. And so now that's what kind of drew me to doing like policy work. And so I'm kind of like now thinking through like advocating for legislation and administrative rules that would actually affect and maybe address like some of the recurring like themes that I saw as someone helping out like low income individuals in eviction defense work, and then seeing that and trying to advocate for I guess like legislation and policies that would actually really change that. But yeah, but I think in terms of like what Adriana had mentioned and Jessica, like year 1L summer, a lot of it is really just kind of like finally getting some experience of like what you're learning in law school and putting that into work. And so a lot of it is like learning how to interview and like learning kind of the type of like paperwork that you need to file for certain things. But yeah, but I think what I saw just like as a one-out summer experience is just kind of like getting your feet wet in legal work.
Yeah, thank you for going over that. I think what we, excuse me, what we see here is, no matter what you do in your 1L summer, it's going to be beneficial for you in your career and throughout law school. So thank you. I'll turn it over to Sophia for the next set of questions.
Thank you. So the next set of questions are kind of digging now into how to get that summer job. And I have 2 questions. The first one being, when sending in applications, it can often feel like a resume black hole. Do you have any tips on how to get responses based on your specific practice area? And for this one, we can start with Adrian and then move to Rochelle and then Jessica.
Are we talking like tips for the resume or just general like application tips?
I think just generally.
Sure. I think there's a lot of ways that you can stand out, right? Whether that's like having really interesting interests on your resume or like, because, you know, I came straight through from undergrad, so I did not have experience to put on there other than like the law school experiences that I had, and maybe 1 or 2 things that I did in college that I think might relate. So yeah, I for me, it was in college, I worked on a compost farm, and like I talked about that a lot during my interviews. I mean, like I worked outside, I like operated heavy machinery. And so I guess what I'm getting at is it just find ways to make yourself memorable in ways that you might not even think are like worth mentioning or like aren't that relevant to the legal profession. Because to this day, like the people who I interviewed with at Farella, like they bring up the compost thing all the time. They're like, you like used to work on a compost farm. And so, yeah, like there's many ways that you can think outside the box a little bit, you know, because people are always like, okay, I want to do employment law. I have to show them that I have employment law experience. I want to, you know, show them that. And of course, that's like a given, right? You want to like draw on all of your past experiences that might give you the skills and knowledge and interest in the subject matter that you're interested in. But find other ways, right? Find other like really cool things about yourself that you can draw upon, put that in your interest section. Just anything that can make you stand out really is not a bad thing. So yeah, I guess that's like the main piece of advice. Just think outside the box and finding ways to stand out.
Absolutely. Adrian, I think that's super helpful. Just find a way to stand out and really highlight what makes you in this resume process, application process. And we'll turn to Rochelle.
I go back and forth on the intersection on your resume. Maybe just because I can never think of anything that's like that interesting, like about myself to put in there. So I don't know. I guess like for me, sometimes I choose that because you know, like you want to have a 1-page resume, and like every space is like very valuable. So if you're gonna I was told like if you're going to put something that's like very general, maybe like don't even put anything there at all. Just like cooking or traveling, like everyone likes to do those things. But if like there's something very specific that you can point to in terms of traveling or cooking, that would make you stand out. I think that is helpful. And I found that like I've heard some interviewers prefer having something on the intersection just so that like they can keep an interview going. But generally, in terms of getting your application, I guess maybe at least just read. I really focus and put a lot of energy into like cover letters. I I don't like writing them, but I do think that like I'm able to, for the most part, for the ones that I get interviews for, like I'm able to really put in my passion like into the cover letter. So like that's one of the ways, besides just kind of like, you don't want to just like repeat in like sentence format what your resume says. Like you really want to put context to your resume in your cover letter. So that's one of the ways that I think maybe my my applications have been picked up. But also, Joe, I found that it's also really helpful just to see, you all will probably heard this, but just to see if you have any LinkedIn connections and really talking to someone in those places. Or even before you submit an application, talking to someone that's at the firm or at the organization, because like you want to be able to really cater your cover letter to that.
Absolutely. And I think that connecting with people at the firm or like nonprofit that you want to eventually work at can really help to show in your cover letter that you've done the research, that you're genuinely interested. And I think that's really helpful when it comes to applying to these type of jobs. And then Jessica.
Yeah, I think I would totally agree with those tips. I think too, what helped for me, especially 1L, is to really try to find ways in which like any of your past work experiences like can connect to the internship you're applying for. And the reason I say that is because, similar to like, I like when I came almost straight from undergrad too, I only had like a year in between and I did not have any legal experience. I think I was working in like documentation. And before that I had worked in retail in college. I worked at a Build-A-Bear, sewing bears for people and doing birthday parties. So when I was applying for my 1L internship, I really felt that, like imposter syndrome. I just felt like, who am I applying to this job? I don't have any legal experience. They're not going to want me. But then I thought about it some more and I was like, look, like this 1L internship I'm applying for, right? It says that a lot of it is going to be interviewing clients and, talking to people through stressful situations. And I was like, I have experience doing that, maybe not in exactly the same way, but like working at Build-A-Bear or at any retail, like you're working in customer service, you're talking with people all the time, you're working through difficult issues with them. So I remember in my interview just kind of bringing that up as like a positive experience and being like, look, I have experience working with kids. I have experience working with families. I have experience, talking to people about an array of different issues. I have an experience working with difficult people. So I feel like that was really helpful to me to just be like, look, even if all you have is retail experience or, even food service experience, any type of, thing like that, that can be so helpful in applying for that 1L internship, because there's a lot of people who don't have any legal experience going into that first internship. So don't let that, prevent you from applying. I think I almost didn't apply to the internship, but one of my actual fiance now was like, no, like you're really good at interviewing people. You're really good at writing, like just apply anyway. And I got it. So, imagine if I hadn't applied, I don't think I would be where I am today. So I think that would probably be my number one tip is just, you have valid experiences, whether or not they're legal, they are valid and they will prepare you, for this 1L internship, and be confident in yourself. Like, don't, I think too, that was something, just like Rochelle said, I don't like writing cover letters, but I think gradually over time, I got pretty good at them because I was like, look, I know my story. I know how to tell my story. And, in this cover letter, I'm going to show them how my story reflects in this resume and what I've learned along the way. And that's, the cover letter is a great opportunity to do that, especially if you're interested in going into public defense work. That cover letter is everything, because if they see that you can tell your own story in like a riveting, interesting way, like I think they'll see that you can tell a client story in the same way, you know what I mean, and be a good advocate. So that, yeah, I think that would be be confident and use all the experiences you have. That's my main tip for the application process.
Yeah, absolutely. Experience is experience, and you got to be confident in yourself and your abilities. So now that we've talked a little bit about the application process, I'd love to ask you guys about some interview tips and tricks for your specific area. And we can go to Adrian again and loop back. So Adrian, what do you think are some like best interview tips and tricks for your specific practice area?
Okay, so having only done employment law since September and having only been barred since December, I will, that's how I'll preface my answer. I think it helps to show that, you have interest in the topic. Because I think there's a lot of people who like join labor and employment and think, I have to have, some sort of labor or employment experience before. Like they think that I don't have any of that actually. Like I never did any like union stuff. I never did like HR stuff or anything like that. So, but what I had was a story about my interest in working with people and how employment law is like something that's apart from most of the legal work that happens at the kind of mid-sized and big law firm world, in that you're actually dealing with people and like real people, real emotions, and like at the end of the day, it's just like telling a story of like of human beings, in the workplace. And so I really leveraged that to be like, this is why I'm interested in employment law. But also, I'll also say I didn't interview for specifically the employment group. I actually interviewed at Ferrella just for the summer associate position. But it still helps like for my specific practice area, just to say how interested you are in it, and like how like what about this sector of law interests you, and for me it was the people aspect and the fact that like employment law touches everybody, right? Like so long as, even if you're not at work, like your past employment history, it influences, the benefits that you might be entitled to if you're disabled and things like that. So I was like, that's such a huge like perk, right? To be able to like understand employment law in a way that empowers you to help not just your clients, but also your friends and your family, and also to enable you to do pro bono work. So yeah, I guess now I'm just like selling employment law to everybody, but it really is a great field. And yeah, I think that's how you could get your foot in the door, is just to understand the practice area itself, and pick and choose what about that practice area interests you, and really, if you have a story from your past or anything like that might be applicable, go with it.
Absolutely. I was also thinking, find the reason why you're drawn to that practice area and really run with it during the interview. I think that's super helpful. And then we'll go back to Rochelle.
Yeah, so I interviewed for a very specific position, which is like the housing fellowship position at the National Women's Law Center. So I really was able to draw from my experience at the East Bay Community Law Center doing eviction defense work. But obviously, like you might not be interviewing for like something very specific that you've done already. And in general, for like public interest, public service, you're probably gonna just want to definitely have a 1 minute answer to like the version of like, tell us about yourself, or like who you are, why you want the position, and what makes you a great fit. And so they're gonna, in almost every interview that I've done, they ask a version of that. So definitely having that prepared. But yeah, if you're covered a lot in terms of tips for interviews, but I think also practice for different types of interviews. What I've found is like, yeah, there are some, I don't like this type of interview, and that's why I'm suggesting to maybe like practice for it. There are some interviews where they're really just trying to make sure that it's an equitable process, so they ask the same type of questions for every applicant, but what they do is they don't do follow-ups. So what happens is that you really just and sometimes they give you the questions ahead of time, but definitely like prepare to be able to like just talk yourself up and be able to cover all the things that you want to come across. Maybe having in mind like 3 things that you really want the interviewers to come to like receive that. Yeah, I think like sometimes interviews are not going to be like that dialogue that I'm really used to, that I feel like I thrive in like making that connection, because they're trying to like make the process like similar for every applicant. But that yeah, I guess that's just something that I've come across recently.
Yeah, absolutely. I think preparing can really help you feel confident in interviews. And I think that's a super important thing for our applicants in the audience to start to think about. And then Jessica.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of those tips. I feel like too, specifically for, if you're interested in public defense work, the number one thing I would say, number one interview tip specifically for public defense work is like, make sure your answers are geared towards putting the client first. And I think that can apply to a lot of different fields of law, but specifically in public defense work, I interned for, quite a few different offices, and now I work at LA County, but in all their interviews, they always asked hypothetical scenarios, like, for example, your client needs this, and, it requires this, like, are you willing to do that? And I think a lot of times your answers should be geared towards putting the client first, because especially in criminal defense, that's so much of the work that we do. Is really prioritizing your clients. But I think too, another tip I would have, and I think something that calmed me, is I would try to go into the interview and be like, okay, yes, they're evaluating me, but like, I'm also trying to see if I like this office, right? I think an interview, even though, yeah, like there's pressure because they're looking at you, like you also need to look at this office and be like, I need to see if I like them, right? And so I think in interviews, I always tried to ask questions myself too, and tried to get a feel for like, what my supervisor may be like, or like what the nature was in that office. Like, are they overworking people? Like, does everyone in the office look stressed, and how respectful are they? Like, how diverse is the office? Like those are all, I think, valid things to look out for in the interviews. And it's important to keep in the back of your mind, like, do I like these people? Will I grow here? What am I going to get out of this internship? You know what I mean? So I think that specifically for public defense too, because, taking care of yourself is a huge part of the job. I think you can't be a good advocate without taking care of yourself. And if you get the vibe from the interview that they're going to overwork you, like, it may not be the best fit. So it's good to ask questions yourself in an interview too. And I feel like because I started doing that in interviews, I feel like employers knew that I was interested and I was taking the interview seriously. So I always, I think it's big to ask questions yourself too, and really look engaged, and always keep in mind that the client comes first. That's my number one tip for public defense interviews.
Absolutely. Client comes first. I think it was really great that you mentioned that you're also interviewing whether it be a firm or an office or really anything. Like, you just want to make sure that your values align with the place you'll eventually be working at. Well, thank you guys so much for some practical advice on interviewing. People in the audience, if you do have any more questions about that, feel free to use the Q&A button. It's down at the bottom, and we can answer those ones at the end. And so I'm going to turn it over to Romaine now for the next set of questions.
Yeah, so before Q&A, we wanted to ask questions relevant to FBANC's theme this year, as well as look to the future. And so for the question I'll pose, I'll start with Rochelle, Jessica, and then Adrian. And the question that I have is the following. So the theme of this conference is No History, No Self. As you can see from Sophia and I's Zoom backgrounds, history can mean a lot of things, as I'm sure all of you are aware. Personal history, professional history, cultural history, and particularly Filipino history. And so the question that we wanted to ask all of you is, how have some of your own history, whatever kind you're willing to discuss, impact your summer job experience or your summer job search?
You're starting with me, you said, Rumi.
Yes.
I got the hard question to start with. Let's see. I do think that like this is something that I incorporate in a lot of like my answers to interviews, or just how I write my cover letters, in terms of how I really create a through line from like my experience, like prior to law school, and then to like why I want to do like certain positions that I'm applying for and I've applied for. But yeah, I think in terms of how I've searched for jobs, I kind of based it a lot on my gut, and how like how if I read about like a certain job position, so if I hear about it, like how it makes me feel. So I think about like, would I enjoy the work? What impact will I make? And what skills will I learn? And some of those like practical things, but also really kind of like really thinking about why did I go to law school? And a lot of that was about like advancing the Filipino American community, and and making sure that there's like real justice in our experience, like in America. And so like with whatever I'm looking for the next like position, it's like, or the different positions I've held like throughout law school, it's like how am I learning about myself in terms of what I can be good at as a lawyer, but also like how am I translating that to like what I can contribute to like the Filipino American movement, you know? Yeah, the question caught me off guard a little bit. Maybe I'll stop there, and if I think of something else, I will add on. But I'm really excited to hear what Jessica and Adrian have to say.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Michelle. I really think being community centered in terms of your approaches from the interview process all the way to what you do as a career is very important to keep in mind, and has roots in our history as Filipinos. So thank you. I think I wanted to go ahead and turn next to Jessica.
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. It's really good. I feel like I, our history, like you said, is a part of everything we do, and you can't really move forward, until you understand your history and where you come from. And I feel like just how Adrian was selling employment law, I'm going to kind of sell public defense. But what I love about public defender offices and those types of employers is I always felt like they cared about my story and they cared about my history, because public defense work isn't for everyone. Not everyone, wants to do it. It takes a very unique, sense of empathy. And I feel like a lot of that empathy comes from your past. So based on my experience with public defense employers, they want to know, your story. They want to know what made you want to do this type of work. And I really respect them for that. I feel like in all of my interviews, it always just came out, that I come from a big Filipino family. And it's because, I really feel like that's relevant to why I wanted to do this work. Being from, my mom was born in the Philippines and we always had big family celebrations. I feel like, like you have friends and neighbors who aren't your cousins, but you call them cousins. And, I really kind of tied that into the work I wanted to do, because I would say, I was taught that we're all family. The community that you're in, we're all family. And just because, someone is accused of committing a crime, that doesn't mean that, okay, we're going to cut them off from society and we're not going to care for them anymore. Like they are still our family, and we still need to care for them, and they still deserve advocacy, even if they can't afford an attorney. And I feel like that really has rang true for me, and I think really why I love public defense work, and I would bring that into my interviews. And I feel like it's something that employers really, respect it, and they're like, yeah, I get that, like that makes sense. I feel like too, I would share in my cover letter, if I was comfortable, or in interviews too, that I had a lot of family members who suffered from substance abuse, and like I saw substance abuse, firsthand. And that really, gave me even more empathy for, the types of clients that we serve in public defense work. And, if there's something in your history that, had caused trauma, but you feel comfortable sharing it with your employers, and you feel like it's relevant to the type of work you're going to be doing, I feel like absolutely share it if you're comfortable. Like I said, my employers, I feel like once I shared, that side of my story with them, they always really identified with it, and they would share their stories back with me too. And it kind of just reaffirmed, that like we're on the same team and we're working towards the same goal. And it really just is so important to share that history, as long as the history that you're comfortable sharing with your employers. It can be the building blocks for making that big connection, and really feeling like you're part of the office, and even making you feel more confident. Like once I was comfortable sharing that aspect of my story, I was like, yeah, like I'm built for this, I can do this, like everything in my life has led up to this. And it just gave me so much more confidence to go comfortably into these internships and into these interviews.
Yeah, thank you for going over that. I love how you elaborated on family values, traditions, and history, being able to let you connect with clients, as well as, bringing that into your practice. Thank you. And finally, we have Adrian for this question.
Yeah, echoing the sentiments that this is a very interesting question and a good question. So the AIDS Legal Referral Panel was the first concerted effort to provide legal services to people living with HIV. It was established in the 80s, has an incredible history of helping people living with HIV. And actually it started off as a clinic for helping people write wills because they were dying of AIDS. And so as someone I'm very passionate about, the LGBT community as a member of it. And so I knew that in my first summer, I wanted it to be impactful and meaningful to me as a queer person. And so the ALRP, the AIDS Legal Referral Panel, it now does, all manner of legal work, a lot of, public benefits and public assistance, counseling and advocacy. They do housing and eviction and, tenant and landlord conflicts. They do immigration work. They do everything. And they do consumer protection work, all for people living with HIV, because there's federal dollars going into this because people living with HIV, they have a lot of needs that are distinct from, just normal people, low-income people. For example, housing is an HIV issue because if you're not housed, then you have nowhere to put your medication, right? And so that like learning all of that throughout my summer, and really seeing the kind of interconnectedness of like legal systems and how that affects people's health outcomes and how that, helps or hurts our communities. It goes even broader than just the LGBTQ community, the HIV positive community. And so to the extent that like history really is at play and matters here, I think it was important for me to understand kind of where my community has been, my community being the LGBTQ community, and having a hand in where that history is going, in my own little way for those 10 weeks that I was at ALRP. And so, yeah, there it is.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Adrian. I think that was really insightful. And I think from here, we will move on to the question and answer part of the the panel. And one question we got from the audience, and really anyone can answer this, is how do you balance code switching between who you are and how you feel you need to present yourself in professional spaces? And do you think there are ways that you have reconciled between the two?
Yeah, I'll say that uh, it's, I think the hardest part is not really, going from like who I am, outside of work to like talking to clients, because I feel like the same person like talking individually to my clients because, outside of work, I'm so passionate about, abolishing the prison system, so passionate about the issues facing, specifically people of color, with interacting with law enforcement and how, our communities are over policed. Like I'm so passionate about that outside of work that it's easy to, stay being me talking to my clients. I think the hard part specifically in criminal defense is a lot of times, the opposing side, right? For me, it's the prosecutor. A lot of times you see them trying to harm your clients, right? They're trying to put your clients in prison for a long time, or they're trying to, you're trying to demonize your client and dehumanize them. And I feel like for me, the hard part is sometimes, honestly, keeping a nice rapport with them. Because sometimes I'm like, man, how could you do this to my client? This is horrible. But you have to keep, a positive relationship with the prosecutor because, if you and the prosecutor have a good working relationship, they can give you better deals, right? And better offers and better outcomes for your client. So I feel like what made it easier for me to kind of like keep those relationships cordial and good working relationships is keeping in mind, like, okay, being a good advocate for my client means, having good rapport with the judge, having good rapport with the prosecutor, even if I disagree with their ideals, we can have a good working relationships. And I keep in mind, like, okay, I gotta put on that nice, work cordial mode so that I can be a good advocate for my client and get them the best deal possible. And, I think that has kind of helped me keep that mode on, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, we do have just a few minutes left, but I would love to turn to Rochelle and Adrian if you do have some insight on this question. I don't want to leave you guys hanging.
Only thing I'll add, I think, is that code switching is such a natural thing, and it comes almost second nature to you the longer you do it, right? And so, and I think there's like a negative connotation with code switching, and like, yes, it's kind of annoying that we have to do it, right? As like people of color, as first gen people, as any number of like minoritized identities within these corporate spaces. But like the question is asking how you balance code switching between like who you are as, like your genuine person self versus who you present in the professional space. And I think the way to really reconcile those two is just to like dispel the notion in your head that who you are is not enough for the professional world. Dispel the notion in your head that like who you are at home is not presentable in the professional sense, and try and make those people align, right? Of course, there's like stuff that you might be like, I would rather leave this out, you don't have to bring your entire personal life and like all your personalities into work, but like that doesn't mean that you don't have to feel like not yourself at work, and so I try to bring my full authentic self to the extent that I can, everywhere that I go, work, this panel, my friends, my family, my loved ones, and so, yeah, code switching it's a natural thing. You will do it, right? And it can feel a little jarring when you're first starting out. But I think the way you ease out of that is just by convincing yourself that like, I am good enough. I like, there's not really a huge need to code switch all the time, right? And I'm just rambling at this point, but like, y'all, we're good enough. We are.
I know, absolutely. And Rochelle, anything to add on before we close it out?
I don't know. I feel like I don't think I have anything else to add. I mean, I guess what I was thinking was just thinking about how like um just being very reflective of like, why do I feel like I need to share this part of myself, and like, am I not able to do it? Or if I'm not able to do it, well, like what kind of environment do I need to make that happen? But maybe I've been kind of like lucky enough in certain spaces, legal spaces that I've been in, where it is really just kind of like more of a gentle relationship of like me getting to know the space and the space getting to know me in terms of like my employers and employees. Yeah, I think it's just about really how much of myself do I want to share, and not necessarily about like having a split self, right? But yeah, I really like what Jessica and Adrian had mentioned about it.
Yeah, so we're having a great discussion, but unfortunately we're out of time. Please direct yourselves to the Komunidad website to connect with our panelists if you have other questions. Thank you to our amazing panelists for their time, and I'll turn it over to Janice for next instructions.
Thank you all so much for your time. This is a fantastic panel with really important insights. I'm sure everyone appreciated. The feedback I'm getting is that people are definitely getting a lot from your comments. Next up, in 2 minutes, we're going to be having our breakout room sessions. I just shared the link in the chat. Please go ahead and make your way to that link, and we will separate you out for networking, speed networking. Thank you so much, Romaine and Sophia as well.